Alright, let's break down the madness that went down in episode 5, and trust me, this one was intense. Rick and Sparrow? They went through hell in this episode. It all kicked off when Rick, lost in his thoughts, decided to stop at this creepy, half-burned hotel in the middle of nowhere. You could just feel that something wasn't right the second they walked in. The place was crawling with zombies, not just the regular ones, but some mutated monstrosities that seemed way too eager to rip them apart. Rick didn't waste any time. Flamethrower out, boom, the lobby was cleared in minutes. But that was just the beginning. As they climbed floor after floor, the threats kept getting worse. Imagine narrow hallways, collapsing ceilings, and zombies lunging out from every direction. And Rick? Still torching everything that moved. Now, let's talk about that boss fight. At the top of the hotel, they came face to face with this massive mutated creature. I mean, this thing was wielding a giant fan blade like a weapon. Rick went all in, unloading everything he had, but the creature was relentless. Just when it looked like Rick was about to get crushed, Sparrow came in clutch, taking the shots that finally brought the beast down. With the hotel practically falling apart around them, Rick and Sparrow didn't have much time to enjoy their victory. They made a run for the rooftop, and in true action movie fashion, they barely made it to the helicopter waiting for them. As they lifted off, the hotel crumbled into flames beneath them. Honestly, this episode was wild from start to finish. It had action, high stakes, and that signature Rick and Sparrow teamwork we've all come to love. But something tells me the horrors of Liven City are far from over. The cold morning air bites at Rick's face as he wheels his bike out from beneath the smoldering remains of the hotel. Ash drifts gently around him, but his focus is locked on the silent road stretching ahead. Sparrow quietly climbs onto the back of the bike, not saying a word, but she doesn't have to. They've both been through enough. Rick starts pedaling, the sound of the tires crunching over broken glass echoing through the deserted streets of Liven City. The sun barely peeks over the skyline, casting long shadows between abandoned cars and crumbling buildings. As they ride, Rick's mind wanders, flashes of the hotel fire, the creatures they fought, the weight of survival pressing down harder with each mile. His grip tightens on the handlebars. He's exhausted, but there's no stopping. Not yet. The train station looms ahead, dark, still, and foreboding. Rick pushes the bike up to the rusted front entrance, pausing briefly to take in the sight. A faint groaning drifts from behind them. Rick glances in his side mirror, a lone zombie stumbles along the road, following them sluggishly. Without breaking stride, Rick stops the bike, calmly unslings his flamethrower, and reduces the threat to ashes in seconds. "Sparrow," Rick says, his voice low. "We're not gonna like what's inside." Sparrow steps down, weapon drawn. "Never do." The doors creak as they enter, swallowed by the shadows of the station's interior. The air inside the train station is damp and suffocating, the faint stench of rot mixed with oil hanging in the shadows. Broken benches and overturned vending machines line the waiting area, and dim sunlight struggles to filter through the grime-streaked windows. Rick's eyes narrow as he spots something unusual, a faint flicker of movement. Sparrow gestures silently to a corner where orange-clad figures emerge, rifles slung across their backs, their voices low and threatening. "It's not just zombies," Rick mutters, gripping his flamethrower. "It's a gang." The gang members patrol the platform, their orange uniforms a sharp contrast to the dim, gray surroundings. Their weapons glint under the sparse light, and their conversation carries a tone of ruthless confidence. Rick doesn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he ignites his flamethrower, sending a burst of fire roaring across the platform. The gang scrambles in panic, their shouts echoing through the cavernous station. Sparrow, quick on her feet, flanks them, picking off stragglers with precision shots. The fight is brutal and chaotic, flames dancing across the walls as Rick clears the area. The gang retaliates, but they're no match for his relentless assault. One by one, the orange-clad figures fall, their weapons clattering to the ground. After the last of them is neutralized, Rick scans the area, his focus landing on a heavy wooden door at the far end of the station. The gang had clearly been guarding it. He approaches, pulling at the handle, locked. Figures, he mutters, wiping sweat from his brow. His eyes land on a lifeless gang member slumped near the doorway. A glint of metal in the man's pocket catches Rick's attention. He kneels, pulling out a bloodied key. "Got it," he says, rising to his feet. Sparrow stands watch, her weapon trained on the shadows. Rick inserts the key into the lock, turning it with a metallic click. The door creaks open, revealing a dimly lit stairwell leading deeper into the station's underground network. "This is where it gets interesting," Rick says, glancing back at Sparrow. "Interesting never means good," she replies, following him into the unknown. Rick pushes the heavy door open, and the hinges groan in protest. Beyond it lies a massive hall, dimly lit by flickering overhead lights. The room is eerily quiet, save for the faint echo of footsteps, too organized to be infected. Rick steps forward, Sparrow trailing silently behind. As their eyes adjust, the scene becomes clear. 9 hostages sit bound and bruised in the center of the hall, surrounded by a dozen gang members in orange jumpsuits. They're armed and alert, pacing near the captives, occasionally exchanging crude remarks. Sparrow lowers her weapon slightly. "They're guarding them like supplies," she whispers. Rick's jaw tightens. "Then let's cut into their inventory." Without another word, he ignites his flamethrower. A river of fire bursts across the hall, engulfing 2 gang members instantly. Chaos erupts as the rest scramble for cover, firing blindly in Rick's direction. Sparrow moves fast, ducking low and weaving between overturned benches and crates. She reaches the hostages, cutting their bindings swiftly with a combat knife. "Stay low and stay quiet," she instructs. Rick continues his assault, flames licking across the walls as more gang members fall. A few attempt to flee, but Sparrow's precise shots drop them before they make it to the exits. As the last of the gang lies still, Sparrow finishes untying the final hostage. "They're clear," she calls out. Rick lowers his flamethrower, but the moment of calm is short-lived. From the far entrance, the distant moans of the undead echo through the hall. A small horde shuffles into view, drawn by the noise and the flicker of firelight. Rick sighs, adjusting the fuel canister. Of course, they couldn't miss the party. He steps forward, flames roaring to life once again. The first wave of zombies collapses under the heat, but more follow, pushing forward with lifeless persistence. Sparrow takes position behind Rick, picking off stragglers with quick, efficient shots. When the final infected falls, Rick glances around the hall, now littered with scorched bodies, both living and dead. His eyes shift to a large metal platform at the far side of the room. A sign, rusted and faded, reads, "Maintenance access, lower levels." A grated floor panel leads to a downward staircase. Rick approaches, peering into the dark abyss below. "Looks like the only way forward," he says grimly. Sparrow reloads her rifle and joins him at the edge. "Nothing good ever comes from going down," she mutters. Rick smirks faintly, stepping onto the platform. "That's why we keep going." As the metal floor creaks beneath their feet, they begin their descent into the unknown depths of the station. The grated platform groans as Rick and Sparrow descend into the dimly lit maintenance bay. The air grows thick, heavy with the scent of rust and decay. At the far end of the floor, a towering figure looms in silence, his orange jumpsuit stretched over grotesquely distorted muscles. In his hand, a massive sledgehammer drags along the concrete, leaving a trail of shallow sparks. Rick halts, raising his G3 rifle, eyes narrowing as the figure's chest rises and falls with ragged, unnatural breaths. The infected brute's head snaps up, lifeless white eyes locking onto Rick. Without hesitation, the creature lets out a guttural roar and charges, hammer swinging. Rick opens fire. Shots ring out in rapid succession, bullets tearing through the infected's chest. The brute staggers but does not fall. With thunderous steps, he swings the hammer downward, narrowly missing Rick as the weapon splinters the concrete floor. Rick sidesteps, swiftly unloading more rounds. Blood splatters, but the brute lunges forward again, relentless. Each step trembles through the bay, metal railings rattling around them. Rick adjusts his aim and fires a precise burst. The creature collapses to the ground, hammer skidding across the floor. Sparrow steps forward. Her eyes flicker with a faint glow as she places her hand on the infected's forehead. The body twitches, then rises slowly to its feet, head bowed. Silent and obedient, the brute stands at Sparrow's side. Rick reloads his rifle. Sparrow walks ahead, the infected brute trailing behind her like a shadow. Without a word exchanged, the three continue deeper into the station's darkened corridors. Rick pushes open the rusted door to the train station's control room. The flickering monitors cast faint light over the space, revealing overturned chairs and shattered glass. At the center, slumped over the control panel, is the lifeless body of the station manager, his ID tag still clipped to his shirt, blood dried beneath him. Rick approaches cautiously, eyes scanning the terminal screen. A flashing red warning catches his attention. Warning, explosive devices armed, train yard. His gaze hardens. 3 bombs. Without hesitation, Rick storms out of the room, boots echoing down the long corridor. He leaps onto the rusted frame of an abandoned train car below, landing hard as the impact sends dust spiraling into the air. Sparrow follows behind but stops as Rick signals from atop the train. He gestures for her to head for the first bomb. Sparrow sprints across the yard, weaving between derailed cars and broken tracks. Rick crouches by the bomb housing, peering down at Sparrow through his scope, ready to guide her. The first bomb, a rusted metal box with wires protruding from the top, sits beneath a broken train wheel. Sparrow kneels beside it as Rick relays the code. She grips the wire cutter tightly. Rick watches intently. Blue. She cuts the wire cleanly. Yellow. Another snip. Red. The final wire drops, and the blinking light fades to black. Without pause, Sparrow darts toward the next bomb site. Rick adjusts his position, climbing across train cars to keep her in view. The second bomb sits beneath a collapsed metal beam. Sparrow kneels again, sweat dripping from her brow as Rick guides her with sharp precision. One wire at a time, the second device is diffused. The two exchange a silent glance before Sparrow races toward the final bomb at the far end of the yard. This one rests dangerously close to the entrance of the underground tunnel, its timer ticking down steadily. Rick steadies his aim from above as Sparrow lowers herself toward the bomb. Her hands tremble slightly, but Rick's silent signals keep her focused. Blue. Yellow. Red. The final light flickers out. Sparrow rises, sprinting to the tunnel's control panel. She slams her fist onto the override switch. With a loud, mechanical groan, the heavy gate begins to rise, revealing the dark passageway ahead. Rick jumps down from the train car, landing beside Sparrow as the gate locks open. The path is clear, but the weight of the mission lingers. Without a word, the two step into the tunnel. Rick and Sparrow sprint through the dark, narrow tunnel, the faint sound of distant machinery rumbling to life behind them. The flickering lights overhead cast long shadows along the walls, as the echoes of their hurried footsteps bounce off the cold concrete. Suddenly, the low hum of oncoming trains grows louder, vibrating through the ground beneath them. Rick glances over his shoulder. 2 trains emerge from the darkness on either side of the tunnel, their headlights piercing through the gloom. Sparrow pushes forward, her breath quick and shallow, while Rick trails slightly behind, keeping his weapon raised. As they near the center of the tunnel, a zombie lunges from the side, grabbing Rick by the arm and pulling him off balance. The ground as the infected tightens its grip, snarling wildly. Rick struggles, eyes narrowing as the train barrels closer, metal screeching along the rails. In a swift motion, Sparrow glances back, but the blinding headlights separate them. The train slams through the space where Rick stood, crushing the infected and Rick beneath its weight. Sparrow's eyes widen in shock as she stumbles forward, forcing herself to continue running. She bursts through the tunnel's exit, gasping for air, her hands trembling as she leans against the rusted gate. Silence follows, save for the fading rumble of the passing trains. But then, footsteps. From the shadows, Rick emerges, his body flickering faintly as the glow of his lifeline artifact fades from his chest. Sparrow meets his gaze. Rick silently retrieved from the ground, dusting off the fragments of debris from his jacket. Without a word, they step forward, disappearing deeper into the desolate corridors of the underground. Rick and Sparrow emerge from the tunnel, their eyes scanning the desolate landscape ahead. The distant hum of the train yard fades behind them, but danger is far from over. As they move forward, the ground trembles underfoot. A shadow looms above, and from the broken bridge, a massive figure leaps down, Odes, the jungle justice, his brutal presence undeniable. His massive frame, draped in an orange jumpsuit, towers over them. In his hands, two sharp, jagged axes gleam, ready to wreak havoc. At his side, two giant infected, carrying massive hammers, stand guard, blocking their escape. Rick doesn't hesitate. He raises his G3 rifle and opens fire, targeting Odes. Bullets tear through the air, hitting Odes in the chest, but he barely stumbles. The giant infected step forward to protect their leader. Rick keeps his focus on Odes, dodging the hammer swings from the giants, but the sheer strength of the foes makes every move perilous. Odes charges forward, his axes swinging. Rick continues to shoot, narrowly avoiding the hammer blows from the giants. With precision, he lands enough shots to reduce Odes' health bar to half. But just as Odes falters, grabbing Sparrow by the head with a single hand. Her feet dangle off the ground as she struggles, but Odes' grip is unyielding. Rick immediately opens fire, but Odes holds Sparrow with one hand, using her as a shield against the oncoming bullets. The more Rick shoots, the weaker Odes becomes. Finally, with a roar of frustration, Odes releases Sparrow, letting her drop to the ground in a heap. Rick's shots ring out again, his rage even more intense. With his health bar nearly depleted, Odes throws a flashbang, blinding Rick and Sparrow. As the light fades, when the light fades, Odes is gone. Above the bridge, a prisoner in an orange outfit grips Odes by the arm, helping him escape into the ruins above. Rick watches in silence, lowering his rifle as the prisoner and Odes disappear into the distance. Without speaking, Rick and Sparrow turn, leaving the area behind as the bridge creaks ominously overhead. Silence falls. Sparrow, though injured, rises shakily, and Rick gives her a quick glance before turning away. The fight is over, but the journey is far from finished.